we're going to start with a great conversation with Austin Marchese, who is the CEO of IYK, and Sebastian Oddo, who is the Global Vice President Lead for Innovation, Web3, and Blockchain Marketing at Mastercard. And fun fact, IYK actually went through the CSX, at the time CSS Accelerator, in the spring of 2023. So with that, please welcome Austin and Seb.
Hello, everyone. First off, I want to thank Anna and the whole A16Z team. Every single time I collaborate with anyone involved in A16Z, I'm like, wow, they are absolute legends. The sheet that Anna sent us before this, I was like, all right, I'm feeling good. We're totally prepared. And so before we get into a little bit about myself, as well as Sebastian, in terms of the structure of today's conversation, we're going to be going through some general Web3 marketing strategies that Mastercard's currently going through and how they look at it, as well as some do's and don'ts in terms of getting partnerships across the line for these massive brands. And so, Sebastian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how many games do you think the Yankees are going to win the World Series in?
That's funny. Actually, I was just on the phone with some of my team members, and we were looking at ticket prices, and it's crazy. I think they're going to sweep them, but that's a Yankee fan.
Born and raised Staten Island.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Sebastian Oddo. I'm the Global Vice President of Digital Marketing Innovation at Mastercard. Prior to Mastercard, I worked 12 years in sports for one of the largest sports marketing companies called Octagon. And I helped athletes, agents, and brands think about what was next. And then I had the opportunity to go run client partnerships for Gary Vaynerchuk in 2021. You know, in 2021, it was a pretty wild year where we helped launch many brands into Web3. And now I sit on the global brand strategy and innovation team at Mastercard, where we think about innovation and technology and how we could apply it to, sponsorships like the Grammys or World Series and Major League Baseball. Yeah, that's what I do.
And a father of three.
Yeah, and I'm a dad of 3 amazing children at home.
Amazing. And so Sebastian and I, we've collaborated together, IYK and Mastercard, and we're going to dive into how we got that partnership and what those deals looked like. A little bit about myself. As Anna mentioned, I'm the COO of IYK. We were formerly in CSS, now CSX. And so what IYK does is we connect physical products to the digital world. What that looks like in practice is we'll work with artists, creators, and brands to ship physical products. And this allows them to get first-party data, as well as create these immersive digital experiences. We've worked with brands like Mastercard, Coinbase, Live Nation, Pudgy Penguins, Doodles, 90cc, in the Web3 ecosystem, among others. And before that, I ran a Web3 consulting agency called The Incubator, which I leveraged my social following. I created TikToks and grew over 100,000 followers there, and I was able to use that to grow the business from that marketing perspective. And so now, Sebastian, I know that Mastercard just came out with their crypto strategy as of this morning. So,
well, I wouldn't say this morning. I would say that Mastercard has a crypto and blockchain team, and they are incredible. If you want to follow them, please follow our handles and see what we're up to. We've done a number of partnerships, and that team could speak to the business better than me, but they are all in.
So now, how does Mastercard look at the Web3 ecosystem right now?
When I first started at the company, I was, before leading up innovation for global digital marketing, I was the head of Web3 marketing. And one of the first things that we did was we built a platform called Path to Priceless, where we took our Priceless.com platform and we started to align the blockchain with our Priceless execution. So think about buying a Priceless.com package, so whether it's going to the World Series or going to an All-Star game, and getting a digital asset tied to that. We built a system that allowed those experiences to get tokenized. So for example, I'll use the World Series or the Major League Baseball as a perfect example. Consumers could buy packages on the website, and we issue NFTs to them. And the more that they buy, the more next-gen loyalty that consumer will build with us. So when they come on site and we scan their NFT, we basically know how loyal they are as a customer for us. And that's been helpful when we think about also cross-passion verticals. When you think about culinary, if that consumer bought a culinary package on Priceless.com, but then also bought a baseball package, maybe we could send them an NFT that was a culinary experience at Yankee Stadium on the field. So we could start to bring together those passion points and really make next-gen loyalty something. That's what we've been focusing on with the platform.
When you're having these conversations internally at Mastercard, I know you mentioned that that they're all in, right? And as founders in this room working on kind of cutting-edge Web3 technology, when you're presented with a new idea, what are those like behind-the-scenes conversations like? Like, how do you get it from this idea that was presented to you to something that Mastercard can go and execute? Because it's not as simple as just let's go and do it.
No, and especially when you said that question, I started to think about my time at Vayner too, when it was very early and brands were just getting their feet wet into Web3 and blockchain. It takes, from what I've seen and what I've really experienced and really tried to push forward, it really does mean bringing the right people to the table. And that doesn't just mean the marketers. That means regulatory teams, that means legal teams, that means finance teams, and really educating people so that they understand what we're trying to accomplish. And by doing that, we can move a lot faster. So if we have a crazy idea, like we'll talk about in a few, which was embedding memories within merchandise at one of our events, that was a spark of an idea that we had to run up the chain and get approved. But in order to do that, we had to get a stakeholder committee together within our company to really truly understand what we were trying to accomplish and if it was going to be doable.
As a company that's trying to sell in or work with Mastercard, whose responsibility is that to get the right people in the right room? Like, should that be something that founders should be proactive about, or kind of lean on the person who's in Mastercard or whatever the brand is? Like, how do you make that happen?
For in our particular case, it's whoever has the idea. It could be someone in finance that has a big idea. It could have someone on the global marketing team like myself. So it's the responsibility of that person to really bring a coalition of people together. I think for founders working with major brands, it's important to truly understand where that person is in the process of getting something approved and how you could help them, right? How you could issue maybe educational documents or details to help that person really shepherd that idea to the end.
Yeah, so one of the things at IYK, what we try and do is, like, when we're working with Sebastian or Mastercard or whoever, like, making their life as easy as humanly possible. And so if that means Sebastian needs a image to throw in a deck, or if they need a deck for this specific thing, let's make it on his behalf so that he can focus on the things that we can't actually control, which is having those internal conversations. Yeah. Ultimately, as a company that's sitting outside of the other company, you need champions internal to actually get these things across the line. So it's like, who is that champion? And because their day is so busy, so you just want to like support them. So like, what are some things where you're
one thing there. So the user experience is really important, and you and the team at IYK have helped us really help explain what the consumer journey was going to be at a lot of our experiences that we worked on together. And you know it the best, right? Because it's your tech. So I think that's important too. And we know our experience and our consumer journey on site at an event. So by layering your user experience, ours, and making that one big moment for consumers on site, that's super helpful.
Yeah, and so how can, as a company, make their pitch that much stronger? Because we're not in the room when you're making these pitches. And so, how can we educate you, user journey, et cetera?
Yeah.
And so you've sat kind of on both sides of the aisle. And so there's two terms when I'm like thinking about different brands that we're working with, like crypto curious versus crypto native. And so a crypto native company like Vayner 3, crypto's like core to their ecosystem, and MasterCard's moving towards that more crypto native as well, but there are other brands that are more crypto curious. And so from your experience like at Vayner, you're working with a wide gamut of companies, whether it's their first time, their second time, or third time in the Web3 ecosystem. How do you like best form these conversations to get the deal done?
Yeah. In 2021, when we were talking to a lot of major brands, Fortune 500 brands, we had to do a ton of education at those organizations. And as you know, with Gary Vee and his amazing team there, they're all about education. They're all about free education, right? Educating consumers and brands by just giving back and being empathetic to the world. And that was what we did first, was we educated consumers and brands about what was happening. And then from there, figure out where in the stage at their organization they were. So if they needed to understand how to get crypto on their balance sheet versus how to design a 3D asset, that was really important for us to educate in the process.
And so understanding what level of education they
Correct.
need.
Yeah, what level of education and then what resources we could bring in to help them at that stage and then help shepherd it forward.
How do you best identify that? Because I know I've personally been on calls where I'm having a conversation, and I'll sometimes just straight up ask them, like, are you a crypto degenerate like me, or like where are we on the spectrum here? Like, and so how have you best identified like how you need to inform them? Because also depending on the product, you don't want to make it too complex because you're going to scare them away. But if it's too simple, they might not actually get the concept.
You'll know immediately when you walk into a meeting whether or not someone's on board with Web3 and ready to go, or whether they are a doubter and you need to, right? So you'll know that as soon as you go in. And I think for us also, there were some brands that leaned into educating their employees, right? Which I found actually really cool to think about, like that a major brand, Fortune 500 brand, was going to invest in their employees to teach them all at the same time where we were in the process of Web3. That, to me, is you get all the marketers like on the same page right then and there. I respect that. I think that would be really cool. So some brands came to us and said, we want to educate. Others were like, we need you to tell us what we need to do.
And if they're educating internally, that means they're allocating budget, which means they're probably ready to move.
Yeah.
And they're taking it seriously.
Absolutely.
And so in terms of our relationship and the partnerships we've done, 2 deals. So the first was at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, where we worked with Mastercard to create a experience where hats were chipped, users were able to tap the product, upload a photo, and now that lives on the product indefinitely. And then the other deal that we recently did was with Live Nation, ones to watch with Mastercard as well.
We actually have a program called Artist Accelerator, which we help bring 5 emerging artists through what it means to be in Web3. And we teach them about emerging tech and AI and technology like IYK. One of our events was at Live Nation headquarters, and we did it with Fast Company. And we had consumers come on site and listen to one of the artists perform. And we had little, they look like baseball cards, but they were IYK versions of our Mastercard Music Pass. And when you tap them, you were then able to then mint a real NFT as part of that. So it was a very easy onboarding. It gave something tangible for people to hold in their hand or to listen to music, and when they got home later that night, they could mint it. So it was easy onboarding.
One of the ways that we look at it from a relationship perspective is we call certain partners agency partners. And in order to get this Live Nation deal done, those cards, those were produced by an agency partner. And then Live Nation, they're now a partner who has all these other artists that they may be working with. And so the more that you're able to work with these specific partners, it goes from a one-to-one relationship to a one-to-many relationship. And those are the type of relationships that me personally, I try and focus on, because that's kind of how you can then scale out. Because if you can only maintain 10 relationships, you would rather have it be 10 one-to-many versus 10 one-to-one. And that's just how I look at it from a relationship perspective. Let's walk through the entire conversation, because I think one of the challenges with companies, we're still facing that, right? Where it's getting in the door, having a conversation. What's the best way to just with these bigger brands, get that first conversation, get that first meeting booked?
Well, I think first is networking. You do a great job of this, and being authentic to who you are. I can't tell you how many LinkedIn messages I get of people trying to come in and sell their service. It's not authentic. It's not real. personally, that turns me off. It doesn't, I want to be able to connect with someone one-on-one about something really amazing. So if you own a business, a small business, and you have something really interesting, tell me why you think it would be impactful to Mastercard, how it could help us, and put a little effort in instead of just having me to have to think about that, because I have other things, right, and other priorities and goals that I need to focus on. So I think that's the first thing. And then second is just making sure that you're bringing, what you're trying to sell very clearly to the table. Sometimes I talk to companies and I come out of a meeting and one of the things that I love about Gary Vee when I was working for him was that these short 15 to 20 minute meetings to get what you needed to get across. And when you're forced to do that, you really have to think strategically about what you're going to say. So, put your good pitch together.
So you put your pitch together, and now you're sold. And so I know for our relationship, we didn't get something done until like probably a year after having a conversation. Like when we first met up at NFT NYC, I think, it was literally a year until we first did that.
Yeah.
And so now it's about maintaining the relationship. And I think there's a fine line between being annoying and being top of mind. Like, what have you seen has been an effective way for smaller companies to straddle that line, but make sure that when they do need a service like theirs, that you call them?
Well, a perfect example would be what you all did, right? Like throughout the year of our relationship, you started to say, "Hey, check this out that we're doing. That's cool. Look at this tech that we're working on." You weren't selling me. You were just explaining to me some of the great things that you were doing because you thought it was cool, and I actually thought it was cool too. So from there, we built a relationship, and that's how ultimately it came to the table. But I think, other ways around that where people are sending DACs and people are like not being authentic, it's not going to work out.
We were having a conversation before this, and everything is just relationship based.
Yeah.
And especially in the crypto community, it's like such a small group of people that before I was at IYK, keeping the story brief, but Anna and I knew each other from her days at Gemini when I was running my consulting agency. And then Ish and I knew each other when that same consulting agency, he hopped on a podcast with me. And so then like once A16Z got involved with IYK, we all started having these conversations, and it was just like this really small world of people where everyone you're talking to, there's probably like a first or second order like network connection there. And so every person is an opportunity to like make a positive impact and like be authentic, have that network so that when Mastercard's thinking of a deal, they're thinking IYK, they're thinking whatever product you're building, because like sure in the short term, maybe it's better to get the extra 10% on the deal or the extra 20% or not do this, but it'll come back around if you're not actually providing value and you're not being authentic.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that we definitely try and do, because we find it's a competitive advantage to have good customer service and for people to enjoy working with you.
And there are many times that you have said to me, "Seb, like this is not for us," right? You were real with me. Even though I tried to push on you to try to figure it out because I wanted to work with you, there were times where you're like, "I got to pass on this because it's just not the right, and it's not going to be authentic to who we are as a brand, as a company." So that builds more credibility in my mind with IYK, that they're not going to just take it for money purposes and then try to figure it out. They know who they are, and they're not gonna fake it. So
appreciate that. And so now it's time. So you have the relationship. You're ready to close the deal. And one thing that I personally struggle on is like, how do you price these deals? Because you want the Mastercard deal, you want the big brand deal, but you don't want to charge too little and like put a bad deal in front of you. Then that kind of devalues your services. You don't want to ask for too much, and now it doesn't actually happen. So
yeah.
And also, because you were on the other side, right? You're on the Vader side. So you've been on the agency side where you're pitching in, and now you're on the brand side where you're getting pitched to. So like, what is the art to pricing?
When I was on the agency side, my main goal for the teams that I managed was to show the client what we had to deliver. Build award-winning presentations, websites, documentaries, anything, and show them what we had. And we did that. And we did that at a rate that was affordable to the clients. A lot of people think major brands have millions to spend. It's not that way, right? They have marketing budgets, and those marketing budgets need to be split out across global teams. But my goal on the agency side, prove to the client that you were really good and you did something amazing, and that's when all the other projects started to come. The real relationship, right? When they start to come to you and ask you that they have a problem and they need you to solve it. And I think that would be my advice to a lot of the businesses, small businesses wanting to work with Fortune 500 brands, is prove yourself, and then you'll see how once you're in the system, how much business would ultimately come.
So that initial deal, get it done, be aggressive there, and then if/when you deliver that value, you'll be able to reap the benefits on the follow-up.
Yeah, and you should do it because you believe in your company and your brand, and you know you're going to do something amazing for them. And from that, everything else will fall into place, right? That's how I live my life.
What are some of the competitive advantages, right? So like internally at IYK, we say that customer service is our competitive advantage. That the tech is going to be the tech, but you want people to want to work with you. You want people to feel like that was amazing, not only because of the product, but also because of that customer relationship. So what do you think, like, because some of these companies, they may be competing with other Fortune 500 companies to close a deal. Like, what are the competitive advantages that a smaller company needs to lean into in order to differentiate themselves from maybe the Vayners of the world that are also competing for this?
I think, like, when you said that, I immediately thought about presentations, like delivering an idea before you could execute. And when I come to IYK and say, hey, I'm thinking about this idea, what do you think about it? Immediately, you all could put together a concept, imagery, really help iterate very quickly, and then get it to us, and we could run with it and go get it approved. Where I think some of the larger agencies need to run, can't even start the work on a design process or iteration because it's got to run up the chain, and they got to get paid for it to do it. Where I think some small businesses that are starting could really use that to their advantage to help, especially around innovation, quickly help global marketers get their idea to the executive leadership.
Right. So that pace, because if it's a big agency, they may need you to pay $1,000, $2,000 for a deck for 2 slides.
Yeah.
And so now you're waiting, and the meeting's coming up on Tuesday.
Yeah. Or you might say, I have a 3D designer that could whip this up in an hour. Let's do it.
Let's just rip
that's
it.
the advantage, in my opinion.
Yeah, being able to move quickly.
Yeah.
So a quick story on Sebastian. So he was a TEDx speaker, and he gave a talk about piggyback rides. And so he was in the business of piggyback rides. And what this meant was that as a father, he wanted to give as many piggyback rides as possible. But due to his, and you can correct me if I'm missing any of this story, but due to his obligations like grocery shopping, cleaning the dishes, et cetera, he was only able to give a certain amount of time for piggyback rides. And the goal was to give more piggyback rides. So what in his day could he automate and could he offload such that he could give more piggyback rides?
Yeah.
Because that was ultimately what he wanted to spend his time working on. And so now my question, the founders here are in the business of building a successful company. What should they be offloading? And specifically in terms of this relationship and the marketing angle, where should their focus be? And then where should they be offloading?
Yeah.
And getting rid of that from their schedule so that they can be in the business of making a successful company.
Again, when I worked at Vayner, we've really focused on time management and really figuring out priorities. And even at Mastercard now, what are the key priorities for you? Laying them out at the beginning of each week and really staying close to what those priorities are. Sometimes we get so distracted by life that we forget about what our priorities are. And those could be for personal, right? I have priorities. I have to go see my daughter's volleyball game at 4 p.m. on Thursday. That to me, that's very important. Doing that for every little thing in your work week would really help bring to life how you could get more piggyback rides, or how to go sit down and have a cup of coffee to really recharge. I'm very focused on wellness and how important wellness is for our well-being. And if you don't do that, you wind up just getting caught up in this spiral of entrepreneurship, which is the craziest. I give a lot of respect for people who have small businesses. So that would be my advice, is to really prioritize.
If everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. Like, what was whether you're working with Gary or at Mastercard, like, how many priorities can there be?
We all have. I mean, if you take 100 of your priorities for the rest of this week, you could look at them if you really sit down and say, which ones are the most important? If you had to do it, you will. So that's my recommendation would to be really to do that and make it a habit, right? A lot of us say they'll do it only during their busy weeks, but if we do it if we create a habit of these, prioritizing what really matters in life, then you'll start to become a lot stronger on those top priorities. And you start to really then create award-winning campaigns. You start to then win those business deals because that brand is more important for your company. So you're going to focus 100% on that one, like you said, that one company that could, split out instead of 25 others that are just going to waste your time.
Right. The high leverage opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Operational leverage. Okay. So before we get into the Q&A for this, if there is a Spark Notes for do's and don'ts, let's call it 2 do's, 2 don'ts for people who are tackling or trying to close business with major brands.
Sure. So a do would be, please be authentic. Please be real, be human. There's so many people that reach out to me that have automated messages, and they just blow up in their face because they forget to replace my name with somebody else that they just sent us. So be authentic, who you are. That's a do. And then the second do would be, think about the company that you're trying to win business from and how your product could be relevant to them. Put a little effort in. So if you are going to pitch a Mastercard, why should it matter to us? And look at our mission, right? Do well by doing good. How is your product going to actually help us on our larger mission? And which department within that company does your product best suit? Is it the purpose-driven marketing team? Is it the sponsorships team? Think about that as well. And then don't keep nagging a company that might not be of interest, because then you lose credibility. Really, I've so many times people get mad at me, and really I can't get to all my LinkedIn messages. They get mad at me because I didn't respond to them, but it wasn't on purpose. It's because I'm prioritizing my family, my career, my goals in life. So that's one thing. And then the second, don't think, this is to your point before, don't think that you're going to land that first deal immediately. There has to be a real authentic partnership and relationship there, and trust, right? I trust that IYK could get a project done. So don't think that it's going to happen immediately, and don't get down on yourself because you don't land that first one. Keep trying.
Amazing. So with that, appreciate all that, Sebastian.
Yeah.
We are going to open it up to Q&A. This is personally my favorite part, where we get to have an open forum.
One of the words you say a lot is authentic, right? And I'm a developer, and I can't be authentic online. I try my best to. I'm authentic in person, and I can speak in person. So can you give any tips on being more authentic online?
As a developer?
Yes.
As a developer? The developers that I've met in my career that have been authentic have provided real add-ons and build-ons to projects. So for example, there have been many marketing projects that we've put together and ideations, and when it lands on that developer's desk, there's 2 things that could happen. That developer could say, all right, I'll just build it to whatever it's going to be, whatever you ask. Or the ones that are truly authentic to themselves might say, I might get some pushback if I say this, but I truly know that this is not going to work. And they bring it back to the marketing team in a way that's empathetic and that is solution-based. And those developers I've always had a lot of respect for those developers because they're being authentic to themselves and to their craft. So that's how I would answer that.
I want to brag about one of our founders, Ryan. He is, you may know him, but like awesome developer, also really big nerd. It's great. When you're having a conversation with him, like on calls, he doesn't like hide his enthusiasm or like he doesn't hide his like nerdy qualities where he's like talking about whether it's the engineering or like his keyboards or his guitars or whatever it is. Like that is who he is. Like he loves these things. And so that's him, right? So that is authentic to him. And there's no reason to like hide that. And so if you like really going deep on Python or like really going deep on Solidity or whatever it is, like don't hide that. And like when you're talking about smart contracts or whatever it is, like nerd out for like 2 minutes and then you're like, okay, sorry, let's bring it back. Like there's no problem with that because that is where your interest goes. And so just like do it. Like, yeah, I don't think you have to be, and Sebastian kind of probably, this is kind of how I treat it, where like a lot of it isn't that serious, where everyone's a human. And so just be a human, and where you kind of run into issues is when you're like pretending like you're not a human, because that doesn't like resonate with people.
When you came to Mastercard, what was kind of the original or kind of the biggest hurdle to get an institution as large as Mastercard kind of on board with Web3? And then I know you look around corners, so what do you think is sort of the next hurdle that you're excited about that you know you're going to have to do a little bit of politicking for?
Yeah. The space, the Web3 space, crypto space, as we all know, is unregulated to some degree, right, in different areas. So ensuring that we're being compliant is the most important thing that we can do. So education was really important for me to talk to regulators, legal teams, franchise, privacy teams, and ensure that we were going to build whatever we were building was going to work globally, that was going to meet all the jurisdictions globally, and that we were going to be authentic to who we are personally. So you take the compliance and then who we are. Those were the biggest challenges that I had. But like I said before, it wasn't just myself. I had really, really incredibly smart people in each of those areas, franchise, legal, regulatory, that once we educated as a team, we then went as a team forward. And that was the only way we were able to get anything done, because we had those incredible teams together. When marketers try to do it, and I've seen this in my career, when marketers try to push an idea through without those teams involved, there's a lot of friction and there's a lot of conflict within brands, and it doesn't then create what we're all trying to do here, which is build the next iteration of the internet. Onboarding millions of people like my mom, it's not gonna get done if there's just this one super focused marketer that believes his or her idea is the best. It needs to be authentic to everyone. So yeah, that's how I would. And then thinking forward, so I believe that in the next 6 to 12 months, things are gonna get really crazy in terms of what's real and what's not real. I truly believe that. I already see it with my kids. My kids say to me, "Dad, is that real?" They don't see it. I could see it because my eye is a little bit trained with certain things. What does that mean? That means that when we start to think about the convergence of AI, blockchain, and Web3, there's this middle ground of opportunity, but also like, how do you move through that in an authentic way? Because a lot of it's unregulated right now. I think I'm gonna have to figure out a way to start talking about that convergence.
Curious internally at Mastercard, how big is your team, and are you like well integrated within the marketing and partnerships teams, or is it more of a siloed team? Just curious about the structure and how it's been evolving.
So our global brand strategy and innovation team, so half of the business is, half of the global brand strategy and innovation team is focused on our brand. What does it look like, smell like, feel like, right? And then the other side, our innovation side, is thinking about what's next. Our global team sits across multiple regions globally, so we're so close to our Americas or our APAC or our EMEA teams, and we're helping them and they're helping us think about marketing campaigns, so we're very integrated. And then, our B2B teams, product teams, we're talking to them on a regular basis, so it requires a lot of coffee chats, right? Like going, hey, what are you working on? A lot of network building, to really just stay connected, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing is being a human and asking just people how they're doing and what they're working on.
I have a question, maybe better for Austin. So, just thinking about our priorities as an early stage startup, my gut says it might be better to go after crypto native companies rather than big established brands, just so we can move quicker. They can understand what we're doing at a quicker, much faster. But obviously, you guys went after the Mastercards of the world. Could you just talk through your thinking about why did you decide to go after maybe more Web 2 native than Web 3 native?
Yes.
Or Web 3 curious, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the thinking around that.
A lot of our first partners were Web 3 and we're crypto native. So our initial drops were with companies like 90cc, Coinbase. And so to your point, right? Those were the path of least resistance for us was initially those crypto native companies. But what that allowed us to do was create these experiences that were compelling to non-crypto native companies. So your crypto curious companies. And it is something that on our side, we definitely still have internal conversations where we're our product best fits at least how it was initially designed as a crypto-based company. And so it best works for crypto companies. So that's the product. And so what Sebastian was saying earlier, where sometimes there's use cases where it doesn't make sense. And so we knew that use case made the most sense. Once we were doing that, in parallel for all of that, we're having conversations with people like Sebastian across different companies where it's this is really interesting. But the truth is that from a partnership perspective, if we were just oh, we're just going after the Mastercards of the world, it took a year for us to get the first thing going. And so if you extrapolate that out across everything, now we're not doing anything for a year, which wouldn't have been great. And so I think on our side, it's what is the path of least resistance? Maybe that's crypto companies. And if it is crypto companies, that's fine. But the use cases that you're doing, they should translate across the alley to your Web 2 companies. And some of our use cases are just more crypto native, and we just don't pitch those. But our product is definitely, it's unique. So I think every product's different. But long story short, I'm a believer of the path of least resistance to build case studies, to build social proof, and then that's when you can go whale hunting.
All right. Thank you, Seb and Austin.
Thank you.